Dorothy the dinosaur was planning a tea party for some friends. She wrote the invitations and took them to the post office. "Can you send these letters for me?" she asked. The man in the post office gave Dorothy some stamps. "Here you are," he said, "one for each letter." Dorothy stamped the letters and put them in the letterbox. Next day, the post lady put the letters in her bag. "I've got quite a few letters to deliver today," she said as she set off on her rounds. The post lady's first stop was at Wags's kennel. "Are you home, Wags?" she called. "I've got a letter for you." Wags was excited. He didn't get many letters. "Thank you," he said, taking the letter and opening it. "It's an invitation from Dorothy the dinosaur," he laughed. "She's giving a tea party." The post lady smiled and went on her way. She arrived at the wharf where the good ship Feathersword was moored. Captain Feathersword was on deck. "There's a letter for you," called the post lady. "And there's one for Henry the octopus too." "Here I am," said Henry, popping up beside the ship. The post lady still had 3 letters to deliver. She looked at the envelopes and was wondering how to deliver them, when there was a fluttering of wings and 3 fairies landed beside her. "We heard you had some letters for us," said one of the fairies. "I'm Fairy Claire, this is Fairy Larissa, and I'm Lucia," piped up the littlest fairy. The post lady smiled. "I'm glad you found me. I was wondering how to get to Fairyland. It's not on my usual route." Meanwhile, Dorothy was busy preparing for the party. She'd been up early to pick some roses and was arranging them in vases and baskets. She found her best rosy tablecloth and spread it on the table. "I'll need cups and saucers for rosy tea, jugs and glasses for rose petal juice, and plates for the party food. I'd better get busy in the kitchen," she said to herself. "Let's see, I've baked some fairy cakes and there are crumpets and rose petal jam. I'll make some sandwiches too. A big bowl of fruit would be nice, and maybe some pieces of cheese and some vegetable nibbles." Soon the table was covered with tasty food. There was a knock at the door. "Someone is early," thought Dorothy. It was Dominic and the Rosie Orchestra. "We thought we'd get here in time to set up," they smiled. "Do come in," laughed Dorothy. "A party isn't a party without music." She greeted the musicians who had brought a violin, a viola, a cello, and a bouzouki. "The table looks lovely, Dorothy," smiled Dominic. "And what beautiful roses!" Dorothy nodded. "I picked them this morning while the dew was still on them." Dorothy heard another knock at the door. "My guests are arriving," she said as she took off her apron and hung it up in the kitchen. Captain Feathersword was the first to arrive, followed by Wags and Henry. The 3 fairies were next. Then a pretty young woman opened the gate and walked up the path. "I've seen her somewhere before," Wags whispered to Henry, "but I'm not sure where." Dorothy overheard the conversation. "Don't you recognize the post lady? She delivered all the party invitations, so I thought she should have one too." "I thought I'd met you before," laughed Wags, putting out a paw. but you look quite different when you are not wearing your uniform. The party is ready, called Dorothy, and everyone sat at the table to enjoy the food, while Dominic and the Rosie Orchestra played. 3 cheers for Dorothy, called Captain Feathersword. Everyone raised a cup or a glass. This is the best tea party we've ever had.